So hello everyone. I hope you are in a mood for some wonderfully crafted worlds because our next speakers came from well-known Czech studio Amanita Design. Their names are Lukáš Kunce and Oto Dostál, and they will let you peek behind the curtain of their upcoming adventure game, cardboard adventure game, Phonopolis. So the stage is yours.
So thank you, Matusz, for the intro. Thank you all for coming and for joining us in this presentation. So my name is Lukáš, and I'm here with my friend and colleague Oto, and we are from Amanita Design, and we came here to Game Days to tell you a little something about our upcoming game called Phonopolis. Before we dive deep into the game itself, I'll just make a quick intro about the studio. So we're called Amanita Design, named after the beautiful mushroom Amanita muscaria. And we are an indie studio based in the beautiful city of Prague in Czech Republic, although many people still believe that we are based in Brno, which is where the studio was originally founded already 20 years ago. And it was founded by this man, Jakub Dvorský, who is our studio director, and he's responsible for designing the entire Samorost series, Machinarium, as well as Pilgrims. And nowadays he is working on a new, not yet announced project. And this is one of the very few team photos that we have. The entire studio actually counts about 30 people at the moment, but we are sort of divided into several smaller teams that work independently on their own games. So currently we've got four new projects in the pipeline, one of which is Phonopolis that we're here to talk about today. And this is just a quick reminder about some of the games that we've made, some of which you may know. So this is Machinarium, released in 2009 and still our most successful game to date. It has sold about 5.5 million copies across many platforms. It's available basically on everything that plays games. And then there was Botanicula, which was created by a whole new team within Amanita Design. Was a team led by Jaromír Plachý, who later made a few more games. This was the final part of the Samorost trilogy in 2016. Then there was Chuchel, or Chuchel, if you like, another game from the creators of Botanicula. And then these two games, Pilgrims and Creeks, are somewhat important for us from the technical perspective, let's say, because these were the first two games that we developed in Unity, game engine that is not that popular nowadays, but it was the thing back then. And everything before these two games we made in Adobe technologies, so basically Adobe Flash, and some of them also ran in a web browser, but as you probably know, Flash is not alive anymore, let's say. And then our most recent release was Happy Game, a psychedelic horror adventure, which is called Happy Game, but it's not a happy game at all. And it's probably been the biggest shift in our portfolio in the terms of the vibe and the atmosphere that it gives. So the rest of our production is very much family-friendly, even suitable for children, I would say, but Happy Game is certainly not a children's game. So that was it for the quick studio intro, and now we will focus on Phonopolis. And before we start talking about it, I would like to show you one of the two teaser trailers that we've released, so enjoy. So that's what Phonopolis looks like in motion, but what it actually is. What is Phonopolis? So it is a new point-and-click adventure game in development in our studio, and it's being developed by an entirely new team within Amanita. This is their debut game, and it's a game that has been in development under the wings of Amanita for almost 8 years now. And yes, that's a very long period of time for pretty much any game, but hopefully it will make at least a little bit of sense when you see how it's actually being made. In terms of gameplay, it's a mix of, I would say, highly varied puzzles that are like carefully integrated into the game world, as well as a little bit of exploration. And it very much plays and feels like a point-and-click adventure game, but it's much more focused on the story and the individual puzzles rather than, for example, figuring out what to do with all the items in our inventory, because inventory is not really a thing in Phonopolis. And in terms of the story, the game tackles, let's say, relatable and real-world themes and topics, unlike the previous games that we made that are more surreal and abstract, let's say. This one is focusing on topics such as manipulation or individualism. But despite those serious topics, we still aim to keep the overall experience playful and more like lighthearted. And you will take on the role of Felix, which is on this image, the cute little guy in the orange coat. And he's a thoughtful young man, and along with his citizens, he's facing the threat of falling under the control of the city's authoritarian leader. You can see kind of his statue in the left corner of the image. And aiming to create a perfectly happy society, the leader invented a system of loudspeakers that are spread around the city. And they give subliminal orders, and they were kind of meant to drive the people to perfection. But ultimately, the people have turned into mindless servants, just, cogs in this kind of artificially shaped society. And at some point in the game, Felix accidentally becomes the only person in the city who consciously recognizes the threat. And so he must try to stop the leader from playing the dreaded absolute tone, which would definitely put the citizens under his control. And while keeping the sort of Amanita Design DNA with its very high focus on the audiovisual experience, Phonopolis brings several new aspects and features, let's say, into our portfolio. So for example, it's the first Amanita Design game that is fully built in 3D, utilizing 3D models, which is something that Oto will dive deeper into in a moment. And an even more substantial change, perhaps, is that it's our first game to feature actual comprehensible text and dialogue. So our previous games always relied just on visual storytelling, just animation, but Phonopolis will come with a fully voiced narrator, which makes sense in this case, I think, as the story we're telling here is a little more complex, let's say, and less abstract. So using a concrete language rather than just animation seemed a natural decision. But of course, animation is still very, very important and essential part of the experience, as Oto will also demonstrate shortly. And before he does, I just want to mention some of the inspirations and influences that came into the game. So generally and artistically, Phonopolis is heavily influenced by the avant-garde trends of the interwar period, such as constructivism, a movement that emerged in Russia around the year 1915, and that was heavily associated with Soviet socialism, was used for propaganda, of course, and social manipulation, which are all very, very important topics in the world of Phonopolis. And that reminds me of a little anecdote. A few years ago, I think it was 2018 or 19, we were at GDC, and we were showing our upcoming projects to a potential partner and publisher from China. And we had a selection of images prepared for them. And I think they probably liked what they were seeing up until we got to this image. Once they saw it, it was clear from their facial expressions that they were a little surprised, and they later admitted that a game focused on such topics probably wouldn't even be allowed to enter the Chinese market. So that's a shame. Another influential movement is futurism, represented in this slide by the works of Italian futurist Luigi Russolo, and even suprematism with its focus on fundamental geometry founded by Kazimir Malevich, whose works you are seeing here. But it's not just art, as in paintings and stuff, that inspires you. It's also, everyday life. So even though we've lived the majority of our lives in democratic Czech Republic, we've all grown up with at least, the remnants of the socialist and communist era. And one of the most notable, I think, are these legendary panel houses, known in our language as paneláky. They usually strike you as ugly, like you don't see a panelák and be like, it's beautiful, but there's something fascinating about them. And plenty of inspiration also comes from, media, such as our favorite movies or favorite books, and quite often those that are primarily aimed at children, partially because of our, nostalgia and memories of the happy childhood, let's say, but mostly probably because of how playful and bold they can be with their stylization, with the environment, or even the story they tell. So the examples here include the works Zahrada or Garden by Jiří Trnka, a comic book by František Skála to the left, and a movie by Karel Zeman to the right in the bottom, and yeah, the book in the top right corner is obvious. And last but not least, games themselves are obviously a huge source of inspiration. So the list of influential games would probably be very long. Some of them could even be considered outdated from today's perspective. So I just wanted to highlight a few of them that we consider kind of timeless, particularly in terms of their visual presentation. And I think The Neverhood is a perfect example of that, being almost 30 years old and still looking just stunning with amazing animation and a great sense of humor as well. And I'd say that's something that we aim for at Amanita as well, to make the games look kind of timeless, so they just don't look obsolete in a few years' time, which is what happens to many games, especially in like the AAA, 3D, realistic, big budget production. You may have a game that for a couple of years is the top stuff in the market, nothing looks better, but then after a few years it just looks old, and we just try to avoid that with our games. And yeah, now I'm gonna hand it over to Otto to show you a little bit about how it's actually made.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Lukáš. So I hope that this presentation kind of helps you understand why we do the things the way we do, because we've been told that our way of doing things is quite specific, so that we do things not by the book, so to say. So let's have a closer look on the creative process from the very start. We had the basic idea that we want to make our game set in this world. We had a really strong visual ideas that we drew inspiration from. We want to illustrate the absurdity of the society, of all the situations the people and characters are put through, and so on. So our lead artist, Eva Marková, started drawing all these crazy machines, quirky situations, just basically let your imagination run wild. And in our experience, it's actually better to be bold with your designs in the beginning, because the moment you start, developing the actual game, there will be some limitations, be it due to just game design or simply the technical limitations. So you will be forced to cut corners. So it's kind of better to be bolder in the beginning, so as much as possible of the initial ideas stays there during the development process. We ended up with tens of those little ideas and situations. Some of them were worth fleshing out, but mostly we have this really large quote-unquote drawer full of ideas waiting for be fleshed out further if needed. We also had a solid idea what we wanted Phonopolis to look like a stop-motion animated movie set in the modernist metropolis, made from cardboard, somewhat reminiscent, of those small paper models architects used to visualize their upcoming projects, because our antagonist is an architect of that city and the society who lives in a city. So I think that that analogy works quite well. So we made a couple of models, some characters by hand from paper, put those together in these small dioramas and photograph them just to test how the cardboard miniatures will look on camera. When we tried some bigger and more complicated sceneries with complex lighting, we quickly realized that our intended workflow has some heavy limitations. We wanted to combine photos or videos of real environments with characters and interactive assets made in 3D in 3D game engine. So kind of like Luminosity did later. And for us, there was really no way to put it into practice the way we wanted. So at the time, we started researching basically how to do Phonopolis from scratch in a 3D engine, solely in a 3D engine. We also didn't want to neglect the part, what makes game a game, the game design alone. But we wanted to have our game as accessible as possible and just fun to interact with. Well, we are really not game designers per se to design some complex game mechanics. So our idea was to just have these small objects, kind of like the real life puzzle boxes, with all the small levers you can pull, the dials you can turn, and the small drawers you can, you find a small key inside, and then you explore the puzzle box and find a place for the key, and this kind of feeling. So we just sat down somewhere with pencils and paper notebooks and started designing our own puzzle boxes, basically. But these puzzle boxes are actually houses inhabited with some quirky people or characters who will interact in some unexpected way for the player's action. So, and these houses form the city by extent, and basically, our goal was to put the we wanted something to be fun to interact with, basically. So that being said, we recognize that for a good game also needs to bring the feeling of overcoming some challenge. So we kind of wanted to have some actual puzzles in there, not just objects you can play with, but something to get stuck on. But our intention was not to create something frustrating. We also added some animations that serve as a reward for a wrong solution. So just basically you are exploring this puzzle, and even if you are stuck, you are rewarded with something funny, or hopefully with something that is pleasure to look at. So as I said, us also being animators or like people with artistic backgrounds, some puzzles we designed were not optimal, so to say, and it was a really big relief to have someone like Jakub Vorsky, who is, I can say, game designer by trade, to be able to come for a little advice and to give us a nudge in the right direction to make the puzzles as engaging as possible. So this was a really big help. Then, playing imaginary computer game on paper with your friends over a cup of tea or whatever is fun, but contrary to the saying, I really think that imagination has limits, especially when you are imagining the ways that people will interact with your puzzle, basically. Well, you can't tell what people will do in this kind of situations, so when you think that you covered all the bases, that you sketched out every scenario, you just will be proven wrong later. So we made prototypes. Each puzzle basically exists in this form of a prototype. You can see that they are visually very crude and just look nothing like the finished product, but functionally they are basically the same. The idea being that throwing out a prototype which looks like that hurts much less than when you have a finished stage you've been working on for weeks and then you discover some fatal flaw and it has to be scrapped, or sometimes there will be some major reworks. So, well, actually, the thing I was talking about happened in this case. This is one of the levels in the middle of the game. You are supposed to use the fragments of the path to align them in a correct order for the main character to make paths to some different checkpoints. And we spent weeks, optimizing the puzzle, optimizing all the small pieces where the checkpoints should be, and this kind of stuff. We play tested it for like 2 weeks. A lot of people played it actually, and it seemed that there is no problem. So we moved to production, and it was the very day we were ready to pronounce the level as finished and move on and never to return to it, hopefully. And our friend animator came to the studio and we were like, hey, we just finished this puzzle, would you like to play it? And yeah, after 20 seconds he was done, and we discovered that there is one configuration of the paths which allows you to skip basically the whole level. So there was an emergency meeting. It was like, we spent maybe days, trying to get out of this mess as gracefully as possible. We did. It had a happy ending, but it further solidified the importance of making even better prototypes to avoid exactly these kind of situations, because making the final level really takes a lot of time. So if there is a potential problem, you want to discover it as soon as possible. So now, how it is actually made? First, allow me a small detour to another project from Amanita Design, Samorost 3. I promise it will be relevant. As you can see, making the assets for our games is not strictly limited to digital media. We try to ground at least some of the parts of the production in reality, mainly because making everything in the computer, so to speak, can be mentally exhausting, especially if you spend like months or years doing the same kind of stuff. So it's welcome detour. So in this case, Ada Lachman, the artist of the Samoros team, made miniatures of the game environments from clay to get the feeling of how the natural light models the surface, and then edit the next layer of details, also sourced from the photographs in digital post-production. The goal is to have something that is digital image, but is somewhat grounded in reality. It should remind you of all those pebbles or all this moss. It should be kind of inviting for you to touch, to resemble really the real life object as much as possible. So in our case, we tried to mimic the look of the miniature world made from cardboard. So we made those real-world models identical to those used in a game engine, made all the wear and tear effects, and put everything together according to the layout of the final in-game level. It kind of should give out the doll's house my grandmother used to play with, found in the attic kind of vibe, or the old used toys you'll find at the flea markets and this kind of stuff. So we've done is to get the understanding of how the real light behaves on these cardboard surfaces, how the paint reflects on different angles. Basically, this was the sort of real-life benchmark to try to emulate as close as possible later in a 3D engine. So let's have a closer look of how the game environments are made. First, we trace the concept art, as you can see on the right, and translate it into the 3D model as closely as possible. Sometimes it can be quite a challenge to maintain the positions of all the elements from the 2D art and have them correctly placed in a 3D space. That everything then sits on the ground. It isn't floating in the air just for the sake to be as close as possible to the original artwork. So yeah, there is a 3D model. Even though the Phonopolis is a fully 3D game, we treat it as a classic point-and-click adventure with all those 2D parallax drawn environments. Or maybe a better analogy would be a theater stage with most of the set, just being flat paintings, and all this is meant to be seen just from the one angle, from the point of view of the audience. So, as you can see, the behind the scenes of Phonopolis, the gist of it is there is nothing much behind the scene in the Phonopolis. What you can see is all you can get. There is really nothing much more in the scene. So, yeah, like that. The next step is, leave the digital world and have a short detour in analog world. This is a game texture used in a game, which is reduced to just black lines and flat coral fields, which is then translated into vector data and sent to the cutter to be transferred on a sheet of cardboard. And then comes the part when you get your hands dirty. Well, mostly my colleague Petr, who is responsible for all the visual side of things, and also he has a background of hobbyist. He makes all these, puts together and paints these small plastic model kits. So he has a really good knack for, making the surfaces as weathered as good as possible. He really has a good feeling for if this corner should be torn this much and that much, and it's just his area of expertise. So after the short detour to the analog world, it's time to return all these small fragments back to the computer. We photograph them and put them back over the initial texture. And we render the lighting and shadows in a 3D software. So we basically bake the somewhat realistic lighting directly into the texture to be independent on the engine capabilities. So this is a final result. Actually, we have been asked many times if it's really worth it to go through all the hassle with cutting out, hand painting, and sending all these little pieces just to end up with a simple texture for a relatively simple 3D model. And the thing is, it could be somewhat emulated, 100% in digital, but you have to think really hard about all those little details, like should this area be weathered more, should this corner be torn more, the paint here, should I add some cracks in there? If you are making it the way we are, it basically takes care of itself because you don't have to invent all this kind of stuff. So it comes naturally with the process, and in hindsight, it's like completely one-to-one time-wise. So it's not lots of time. Now, quick rundown how we made key art, which you can see in all the promotional materials. Again, there is a concept art with all the elements neatly laid out. Everything is in a nice composition. Nothing covers anything. So when you try to translate it into 3D, you end with an object that looks like that. So for the sake of being as close as the initial concept art as possible, so the perspective in Phonopolis is really strange sometimes. And there is the IRL model in all of its kind of skewed glory. And it ties into that sometimes we just can't help ourselves and actually put those levels or the fragments of the levels together because we already have all the part made, so why not? And it's kind of a moral boost to see something actually materializing in a physical form. I think that it's somewhat reminiscent of if you are developing a game, you release it and then you can hold the actual box with your game or some piece of merch, and you suddenly think very differently if it's something that actually exists as an object. So yeah, it's kind of moral boost to see some pieces of the game standing around the office and be able to actually touch them. So yeah. Now for the characters. As was mentioned before, we are big fans of traditional animation, so we wanted to pay homage to the classical cutout animation technique, even though we use 3D engine and fully skin and rigged 3D characters. So every character is basically a collection of those of many different small parts that come together to form a character, and as you can see, it can get quite messy sometimes when I'm, rigging these characters and deconstructing them, laying them out to all those little small parts. When I come back 2 weeks later to make some adjustment to the rigging, I'm like, what game character is this mess even supposed to be? So sometimes it's really hard to tell that in the end it forms some game character. Another, so to speak, hacks or cheats that we use to emulate the traditional animation techniques are animated textures. In analog stop-motion animation, every slight change in a posture necessitates the change for a different cutout part. So when the character moves, it flickers. So in Phonopolis, every texture is made 4 times, and we cycle through these 4 variants to get this kind of flickering effect. So that accompanied with 12 frames per second frame-by-frame animation, when animator basically sets up every frame manually. There is no in-between. Generated in between. Every frame is made by hand, essentially, with the animator. All these things are supposed to emulate the look of traditional analog animation. And another aspect of the old animations we find quite endearing is the stylized particle effects like smokes, explosion, and so on. So of course, Phonopolis also have those. We felt like basically anything simulated, even the smooth motion of the particles generated from the particle systems in game engine would be kind of off-brand for the look of Phonopolis. So we decided to make our own particles by hand, and yeah, it also entails to make a lot of these frames by hand. So yeah, it's kind of time-consuming, but I think that it's pays dividends in the end. Another thing we spent a lot of time developing was the camera effects and post-processes, again, to get as close as possible to the analog TV cameras back in the day. Games like Cuphead would be a good example of just how the camera effects tied with the visuals give you the feeling or the vibe you are going for on the first sight. So it was really important to nail the camera post processes again. For the gaming experience, as was said before, we like the game to be as interactive as possible for the player's curiosity, basically to be rewarded with, for example, little animations. And then that brings us to the kind of dark side of the interactive media, such as games, that players are unpredictable, and you have to take care of many situations and their combinations. And so you kind of end up with a game logic like this. This is the animator controller for some NPC, and every one of these nodes is a special animation which was made specifically for the situation. Most of them are just transitional animations taking care of, if this character is doing this, and then the player decides to do something different. How do we get there? Yeah, we need a special animation for that. And some of those are even the small animations, those rewards. For example, if the player is curious, and when this character is returning and I send the other character up the stairs and they meet, what will happen? Yeah, something funny will happen, something we kind of want to take care of, just to encourage the exploration. So for instance, there is another level which is basically the machine who prepares food for the people from in the other room to eat. And when the player gains control, he can do basically everything. There is 6 tools and ingredients in every layer. So we can't really take care of all the combinations. It will be in the hundreds, but we try to maintain the illusion that player can cook whatever he wants, and also be it, I don't know, for example, cherries with a mustard, and send it to the next room for the people to eat, and maybe he will be rewarded when he leaves the level. You can see the aftermath of the cooking spree he was doing all the time while playing this level. So we just hope that people will have fun interacting with and exploring the puzzles in our game. So let's see. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Otto. I will just do a very quick outro. So it will still take some time before we can let you in to the world of Phonopolis. We don't really have a release date yet, but at the moment it seems it should be, we hope it will be ready at some point in 2025. For now, you can wishlist the game on Steam. It's easy to find. If you want to use the QR code, you can, but otherwise you can just type Phonopolis into any search engine and you will find it easily. And with that, we've basically ran out of slides. You can follow us on all the traditional, social media. And thank you for coming.
And if there are any questions? Ja. What?
So if you guys have any questions, just use Slido or raise your hand and I'll come with mic. Any questions out there? Okay.
So your games always have such visual identity, always stand out. And I was wondering how it influences game design specifically. Do you start with the visual identity first and then it creates a basis for your game designs? For example, the materials you will use, the kind of puzzle boxes you built or so on. So is it fair to say that your games are always like visual theme driven and it is what what becomes the basis for game designs?
Yeah, I think that is kind of exactly as you said, that we first, the core team, we all had a artistic background. We were studying animation, so we basically, first thing that came to mind was that we want to make game which looks like this. And it kind of pains me to say, but the game design was on the second level at that moment. But as I said, we didn't want to neglect the game design. We really recognize that good games are good games because it's fun to play and interact with them. So we had the luxury to ask the more experienced game designers to help us out. So it's not like the games should look good and play okay. We try to make it look as good as possible and play as good as possible. But yeah, first was the setting the visual identity and the atmosphere and this kind of stuff, and the gameplay came later. So yeah.
Okay, any other question? I guess that we can have one more. Anyone? Don't be shy. Okay, if in that case, thank you guys for this talk. Thank you for getting to see this talk, and see you in a few minutes for another presentation.
Thank you.